Good? Okay, good morning, everyone. Parshas Shoftim. Parshas Shoftim, page 1024. 1024. 1024. Okay, so once again it's a action-packed Parsha as we come towards the end of Devarim. Lots of different mitzvahs, fundamental concepts. Let's have a look at a few of them and then we'll try and go into one a bit more in depth. So the first one, of course, is the mitzvah of appointing judges, having batei din, a system of justice, and so on. So let's have a look at what the pasuk says. It says, Shoftim v'shoitrim, judges and officers, titein lecha b'chol sharecha, you should place in all of your gates, meaning all your cities, asher Hashem aleikecha noisen lecha, which God will give you, lishvatecha, divided among your tribes, shoftus om mishpat tzedek, and they should judge the nation righteous judgments. Leisate mishpat, they should make sure not to pervert justice. Leisaki ponim, not to favor people. Leisikach shoichad, not to take bribery. Ke shoichad ya'avir einei chachamim, the bribery will blind the eyes of the wise, v'salef divrei tzadikim, and distort, make crooked the words of the righteous. And then it says, tzedek tirdoif, righteousness you shall pursue, in order that you should live, inherit the land, and then, right, the next portion is, leisita lecha asherah kol eitz, eitzel mizbach Hashem elokecha shetas lach. You should not plant any tree, an idolatrous tree particularly, next to the altar of Hashem that He will give you. So a couple of things. First of all, just the emphasis on the word shoftim v'shoitrim, right? Judges and officers. What's the function of a judge? What's the function of an officer? So Rashi explains the shofet, the judge, judges the nation and establishes the law. So some people come to a beis din, they have a shaila, they have a dispute. Here we are. There's more handouts here. Oops, sorry. And it's the judge's role to establish what the halacha is, right? Then there's shoitrim, which is officers. Their function is to enforce the law. So if the beis din paskin someone is guilty, chayev, whatever, something needs to happen, it's the officer's role then to enforce that it actually happens. I'm mentioning that just because it's interesting, when we daven every day in Shemona Esrei, in the Amidah, we ask Hashem to bring, because obviously the judges we're talking about here is a proper beis din, a Sanhedrin, like we used to have in times of old, right, with real smicha, not like we have today, of course, but although we have a similar concept today, but not exactly the way it was. So we ask Hashem, one of the things we ask Hashem in the Amidah, when we talk about looking forward to the Geula, to the redemption of Mashiach will come and so on, we say a phrase which is actually based on a different pasuk, not in Chumash but in Tanakh. We say, Hashiva shoftenu Gourarie shayna, return our judges like in the times of old, in other words, as it was originally, but Yo'atseinu kevatchila, and our counselors, our advisors, as it was in the beginning, right? We don't ask Hashem to bring back the officers, right? So it's obviously referencing this pasuk, but we ask Hashem to return the judges and the Yo'atzim, which is advisors, but we don't talk about bringing back the officers, the shoitrim. The reason for that is because the pasuk that is based on in Shemona Esrei is not this pasuk, it's a pasuk in Tanakh. It's one of the Haftarahs, where Hashem, is part of the comfort or part of the prophecy for the redemption, says, "Ve'oshiva shoftayich Gourarie shayna ve'yatzayich kevatchila," will return your judges like it was in the beginning, like it was in times of old, and your counselors the way it was in the beginning. The reason is because the idea of an officer is really only there when we are tempted not to listen, which is until Mashiach comes, right? We have the Yetzer Hara, and people resist and fight the halacha the way it's been established. When Mashiach will come, however, which is what we're davening for in Shemona Esrei, it'll be a time where the pasuk says, "Ruach hatumo avri min haaretz." Hashem says, "I will remove the spirit of impurity from the land, and therefore there won't be a Yetzer Hara. There won't be a temptation not to listen. We might not always be as knowledgeable as everyone else is. In other words, we might still need to know the halacha. We might still need advice. But once it's given to us, and once the law is paskined, we will listen to it right away. Right? Rabbi Shapiro, the famous Rabbi Shapiro, says a very beautiful thing. He says, why is the law of judges right before the law of the Mizbeach? Right? So we have this paragraph of the judges, and right away there's the halacha about what you should not do or not do next to the Mizbeach, next to the altar. He says, what's the connection between these two paragraphs? He says a very beautiful thing, which is really a foundation in leadership altogether. He says that the Mizbeach in the desert was called Mizbeach Adama, right? It was a Mizbeach of earth. Because the way the Mizbeach was made in the desert, it was actually a Mizbeach which was filled, it was hollow. It was filled with earth, with earth from the ground, and then it was covered with copper. Right? He says that's a judge. A judge has to be inside like earth. Earth means humble, right? Because offer, dust, is a symbol of humility, like we say in Amidah, the nafshi offer la koeltia. We ask Hashem to make our soul like dust. In other words, give us humility. So a judge has to be very, very humble on the inside, but on the outside, he's got to be strong. He's got to enforce. He's got to teach. He's got to lead. He's got to have strength. So it's the combination between essential humility on the inside and strength on the outside that makes a good judge and a good leader. He says that's why Shoftim v'Shotrim is put right next to the laws to do with the Mizbeach. Very beautiful idea. The Vilna Gaon points out an interesting thing is when it says about a judge not taking a bribery. It says you shouldn't take shaykhad, you shouldn't take bribery, because the bribery blinds the eyes of the wise. Right? The same pasuk is earlier on in the Chumash, in Parshas Mishpatim, where it also talks about judges. And there it says that the bribery blinds the eyes of the pikchim. Pikchim means clever people. Right? Here it used the word chachamim, and over there it used the word pikchim. What's the difference? So the Vilna Gaon, the Gourarie, explains that a judge has to have two levels of chachma, two levels of wisdom. He has to be knowledgeable in Torah. He has to know a lot. He has to know the halacha, right? But he also has to be knowledgeable in the ways of the world. He has to be clever, right? You can have someone who's academically very clever, but they're not in tune. They're not clever. They don't pick up nuances. They don't pick up the way people are testifying, the way they're looking at things, the way they're dealing with things. A judge, a dayan, has to have both. Has to have chachma, both in Torah and general cleverness, which are the two terms of chachamim and pikchim. A chacham means someone who's wise, wisdom. In other words, someone who knows Torah, right? That's chachamim. Pikchim, I would call someone who's a pikeach, means he's clever. He's a clever, intelligent person, right? Not just academically, but he's smart. So, to be a proper dayan, you have to have both. You have to have chachamim, chachma, and pikchus. That's why in Mishpatim it says pikchim, over here it says chachamim, but the Torah is warning us that bribery can blind both. You know, right? Bribery can mess you up on both levels. You can be a very intelligent person, but bribery will distort that. You can be a very wise person and know a lot. Bribery will distort that as well. That's why in Mishpatim it says Shaychad is Ya'aver Einek Pikchim, and in our Parsha it says Einek Chachamim. And finally, there's another word on this Parsha, on this little thing from the Rabbunim Pshischa. He says the following. He says, "What's the expression Tzedek Tirdoif?" Right? Everyone always quotes this pasuk. Tzedek Tirdoif. Right? What does that mean? It's like an emphasis. You should pursue justice, but it says, I mean, every word in the Torah is very thought out. It's very exact, right? So he says like this. He says we have to pursue justice, but also the way we pursue justice also has to be just. Right? Although sometimes we have a good ending, a good goal, but the means that we use to achieve that goal isn't so kosher. So that's what the Torah means. Tzedek tirdoif. You pursue justice, but the journey to the justice also has to be tzedek. So you tzedek. It's you using tzedek to pursue tzedek. That's why it's a double expression. Tzedek tirdoif. Okay. Just to point out another couple of things in the Parsha. So if you have a look later on, I'm not sure where it is. Yeah, next page, 1026. It talks about having questions and going to the Sanhedrin in order to ask them a shaila and so on. So there's a pasuk, a very famous pasuk. I just want to point it out. I think I've done this before, but I just want to point it out because it's very important. Pasuk Yud Aleph, towards the end, verse 11. So it says, Al pi ha-Torah asher yerucha. Based on the Torah, the teachings that they will teach you, Al mishpat, and on the judgment, asher yormi lecha taseh, which they will tell you shall do. Lo yisasur min hadover asher yagidu lecha. Do not deviate from anything that they will tell you, yamin usmoil, right or left. In other words, you have to listen to the Sanhedrin. It's a very, very fundamental pasuk. It goes together with a couple of similar pasukim, but this is a very fundamental pasuk. And the pasuk here is talking, basically, it's the mitzvah to listen to mitzvahs derabanan and gzeiros derabanan. Mitzvahs which are rabbinic, decrees which are rabbinic, and listening to Torah Shabbat Peh in general, right? Which is a very, very important thing. In other words, there's a famous phrase, people say, is this d'oraisa or d'rabbanan, right? This mitzvah I'm doing, is it d'oraisa or d'rabbanan? Is it biblical or rabbinic? We always talk about biblical mitzvahs and rabbinic mitzvahs, right? So, taking lulav on the first day of Sukkot is a biblical mitzvah. Taking lulav on the third day of Sukkot is a rabbinic mitzvah, right? So sometimes we tend to mistreat rabbinic mitzvahs. It's not biblical, it's just rabbinic, right? Which is a very fundamental mistake. Meaning, it is true that some rabbinic mitzvahs have leniencies because that's the way they were structured to begin with. So we have a rule, for example, that sofek d'oraisa l'chumra, sofek d'rabbanon l'kula, which means when you have a biblical mitzvah and you're in doubt, right? So you have to be strict. If you have a rabbinic mitzvah and you're in doubt, you can be lenient, right? But that's true. That's the way the mitzvah was designed to begin with. But in terms of our attitude of how we keep these mitzvahs which are rabbinic are equally important as d'oraisa. Why? Because in truth, the whole thing's a mistake. Listening to rabbinic mitzvahs is a d'oraisa, is a biblical commandment. Follow? The Torah says here, lo yisasur, you're not allowed to deviate from what they tell you, yamin usmoil. So in other words, what the Sanhedrin paskin, or the various decrees or the mitzvahs that were made throughout the ages by the legislators, following the proper halachic process, although they might be called rabbinic mitzvahs, but the Torah says you have to listen to rabbinic mitzvahs. So in other words, rabbinic mitzvahs are biblical. Yeah? You don't look convinced.
No.
Huh?
Yeah.
How do we know this? So we know from a very simple practice. In fact, the Gemara discusses this, right? When we do rabbinic mitzvahs, we make brachas. Like all mitzvahs, right? So we make a bracha on Hanukkah candles, for example, or on Shabbos candles. What's the bracha that we make? We say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kedushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu l'hadlik ner Shabbos kodesh. Bless Hashem that He sanctified us, b'mitzvosav with His mitzvahs, v'tzivanu, and He commanded us to light Shabbos candles. So He commanded us to light Hanukkah candles, right? Or to take the lulav on the third day of Sukkot, whatever. Right? So the Gemara asks a question, I think, with regard to Chanukah and with regard to Purim. The Gemara says, what's the bracha? The Gemara says what the bracha is. V'tzivanu al mikra Megillah, al halik ner Chanukah. And the Gemara says, v'heichon tzivanu. What do you mean? How can you say Hashem commanded us to read the Megillah? Hashem commanded us to light Chanukah candles. V'heichon tzivanu. Where did He command us? Where? Says the Gemara, this pasuk. The Gemara learns it out from this pasuk. In this week's Parsha, the pasuk says, "Lo yisasur b'kol asher yagidu lecha yamin usmoil." You're not allowed to deviate from what they tell you, right or left. That's the pasuk. That's the pasuk where it tells us we have to light Hanukkah candles, we have to read the Megillah, and so on. That's why you can make a bracha, and you can even say, "Asher kedushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu." Hashem commanded us, even though it's not an explicit command in the Torah to light Hanukkah candles, but He did command us to do it because He commanded us to listen to the Chachamim. And because they said we have to light Hanukkah candles, so we do. It's a mitzvah from the Torah. The fact that it has leniencies, that's just the way it's designed. But it doesn't mean that it's essentially a more lenient mitzvah. In fact, the Medrash says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, we mentioned this a number of times, that Hashem says, Chavivin olai divrei seifrim. The words of the rabbis, the words of the rabbinic mitzvahs are more precious to me, Hashem says, than the biblical mitzvahs. Why? Because rabbinic mitzvahs have a very, very great depth to them, and that is that it's something that we created. Something that Jews don't know. Mitzvahs that Hashem told us to do, we have to do. Obviously, so Hashem told us we're going to do it. But the mitzvahs that we created, so to speak, that has a special preciousness to us, to it, even more biblical mitzvahs. And that's why Hashem says, Chavivin olai divrei sofrim, they're precious to me, these mitzvahs. Right? So I just wanted to point it out. It comes from this pasuk in this week's Parsha. Okay. Just another quick thing to look at is the mitzvah of appointing a king. So let's have a look at it. It's on the same page, 1028. Yeah. Says the pasuk, Kisovai el haaretz. When you come to the land, Asher Hashem Elokecha noislach, what Hashem will give you. V'yirishta v'yashafta bo, you will inherit the land, you will settle the land. V'amarta, and then you will say, Osimo alai melech, let me place on me a king. K'chol hagoyim m'shavoisa, like the other nations. Says the Torah, yes, soim tosim alecha melech, you should. It's a mitzvah. Mitzvah to appoint a king. Asher yivchar Hashem Elokecha, that Hashem will choose boy. Mikerev achecha, but you should choose the king from amongst your brothers. Tosim alecha melech, le'suchel lasis alecha ish nachri, you cannot place any stranger. We learn from this not only the person has to be Jewish, but his parents have to be Jewish and so on. Asher lo yachichahu, you can't take anyone that's not a full-fledged brother, so to speak, and he hasn't come from Yidden as well. Right? So that's a mitzvah of appointing a king, and then the Torah goes on to talk about various mitzvahs that relate to a king, the mitzvahs of Minui Melech. Famous kasha, famous story, famous question is like this. I want to just learn with you a little interesting kliyokar here. That when the Yidden came to Eretz Yisrael, right, Yehoshua took them into Eretz Yisrael. After Yeshua passed away, he was the successor of Moshe Rabbeinu. After he passed away, there was a period of time where the Yidden weren't fully settled yet in Eretz Yisrael, and they didn't have actually a king. They had a system called Shoftim, they had judges. So they were leaders, but they weren't exactly kings, right? Like Shimshon, like Gilad, like all these different people, right? Until you came to Shmuel Hanavi. Shmuel was a prophet. He was the leader then. And then the Yidden came to him to approach him and they said, it's time for a king. Right? And Shmuel got all upset. How come? Chutzpah? Why do they want a king? Right? They came and they said, Tnu lana melech, give us a king, like everyone else. And Hashem said, don't worry, they weren't attacking you. In fact, if anything, they're forsaking me. Hashem agreed that it wasn't such a good thing, but it wasn't directed at Shmuel, it was more directed at Hashem. And the whole thing, right? So all the Mepharshim asked the question, what's going on here? It's the Torah, it says you have to appoint a king. It's a mitzvah. In fact, the Rambam brings that there's 3 mitzvahs that apply to when the Yidden fully settle in Eretz Yisrael. One is to appoint a king, the other one is to build the Beis HaMikdash. Or not in that order, I think it's to appoint a king. The second one is to wipe out the children of Amalek. Right? And then to build the Beis HaMikdash. So that's exactly what happened. Eventually they came to Shmuel. Hashem appointed a king who was Shaul HaMelech. Eventually became David HaMelech, but it was Shaul HaMelech, King Saul. He waged a war against Amalek, because that also has to be run by a king. He messed up a little bit because he didn't kill the whole Amalek, but that was the mitzvah of wiping out Amalek. And then David HaMelech came and finished the wars and conquered the entire Eretz Yisrael, and then it laid the plans for the Beis HaMikdash. So what was the problem in them asking for a king? Many, many answers are given. One answer is, if you look at your handout, I'll just learn through with you a little bit of a kliyaka, very interesting, very funny kliyaka. This is I'm not going to do the whole kliyaka because this is the middle of the kliyaka. He points out like this, he says that the answer lies in the wording. In the Torah here it says that you will come and you will say, Osimo olai melech. I want to place upon me a king, meaning an authority upon me. I accept the authority of the king and I make myself subservient to the king. Right? That's what our pasuk is talking about. That's what Parshas Shoftim is talking about. A king is someone who's authority. You're going to subject yourself to the authority of the king. You're going to surrender, become subservient to him, and you follow him. Right? When they came to Shmuel, if you look at the wording, they didn't say that they're going to put a king upon them. They said, Tnu lanu melech, give us a king. Not place a king upon us, but give us a king. Right? So the Kiyarka says like this. Have a look. He says, I will be Mei Shmuel. We'll learn it through together. Right? I will be Mei Shmuel. In the days of Shmuel, he says, Loi dibru nachoino. They didn't speak correctly. Why? Ki amru, they said, to no lonu melech. Give us a king. Loi amru oleinu melech. They didn't say upon us a king. Elo lonu. They just said give us a king. Not oleinu, but lonu. Why? What's the difference? He says, Ki lo rotzu lekabil morus. They didn't want to accept authority. Shehiyeh moiroi oleinu, that he should have his jurisdiction upon them. Elo yiyeh lanu masi biyodeinu. He said, we want a king that we should control. Lahakim malkin ulahoid malkin. Lahadi malkin, right? Just to set up a king, we should have everything. V'yoytze lanu, what's going to be the result? Mizeh shebal korcha yachnif lanu. That we will control him completely, and the end result will be that he's going to have to just flatter us. He's going to have to butter us up the whole time. Right? He's going to be subservient to us rather than us being subservient to him. Ve'al kain amru l'shoifteinu. That's why they said we want a king to judge us, k'chol hagoyim, like all the other nations. Right? K'ikar tzorach hachanufo b'mishpatim, because those judgments is where he's going to have to judge us, but he's going to have to really play it right with us, because we're going to control him rather than he control us. And then he has a very funny thing. He says, "Ukaminig arotzes elu." He says, like the minig of these lands. The Kli Yakar lived about 400 years ago, 350 years ago. He was a Talmud of the Maharal. He says, nothing's changed. He says, this is the minig of these lands. He says, "Shemekablim ezer rav al zman yodua." They appoint a rabbi for a short amount of time. Kedei lo yishehei moseh aleim. Not that his authority should be upon them. Adrabah, on the contrary, a masav al arab, that their fear should be on him. That's what he says. And therefore, the whole time, all he needs to do is make sure he's in their good books to hunt for them, to flatter them, that they shouldn't fire him. That's fantastic. All right. So that's one answer. The other answer that's given about the difference between Shaul HaMelech and when they ask for a king and in Parshas Shoftim, that if we look in Mefarshim and in Kabbalah and so we find two functions of a king, right? It goes back a little bit to what we talked about before about Shoftim and Shotrim. So a king has two functions. One, a king is supposed to be someone, the ideal king, not all kings were like that, but the ideal king is someone who is, like it says about Shaul HaMelech, Mishichmoi ulamayla mikol, which means head and shoulders above the rest. He's a different kind of person. He's a tzaddik. He's a leader. His insights are greater. He's a holy person, like David HaMelech, Shlomo HaMelech, these people. Right? Such a king has two functions. One function is administration, meaning to run the country and to enforce the law. The other function is to bring and teach the nation things that they cannot achieve themselves because they're not on that level. Right? The real ultimate mitzvah of appointing a king is not for authority purposes. No, it's not to enforce the law, because we're supposed to listen to the law ourselves. We're supposed to listen to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? Therefore, we're supposed to live in peace. We're supposed to not commit crimes. We're supposed to do things which are correct. Why does the Torah say there's a mitzvah of minui hamelech, there's a mitzvah of appointing a king? The reason for that is because of the second function of a king. The real ultimate king is that he should be a person who's head and shoulders above the rest, and he should be a leader to bring and inspire the nation in ways that they cannot do themselves because they're not on that level. Right? That's what the Torah is talking about in Parshas Shoftim. When they came to Shmuel HaNavi and they asked for a king, they said, like all the nations around us, in other words, we want a king to run the country, to enforce the law. That's why Shmuel was upset. He said, looks like they're not on the level yet to be able to fulfill the mitzvah properly, like it's described in Parshas Shoftim, and that's why I was upset. So that's another sort of understanding of why there was a problem in Shmuel Navi's time, even though there's a pasuk that says that we have to appoint a king. Okay, good. I want to look at towards the end of the parsha. There's a very interesting piece here, and I want to just go through it a little with you and pick up on a few things, and also connect it to the month of Elul. It's the halachas of how the Jews should fight a war. Sorry? Page 1038. I want to go through the psukim because we're going to need to look at it a little bit. Okay. When the Jews would go to war, and there were wars that they had to fight, Milchemes Mitzvah, wars of Mitzvah, wars against the nations, etc., to conquer Eretz Yisrael. If they were attacked, whatever the case is, there were different wars that they had to fight, right? So when they would go to war, there would be officers that would prep them before they went into war, and kohanim, right? there was a whole system of how they needed. There was a whole proclamation and announcements that were made before they actually went into war. Some of them were made by the officers, some were made by the Kohanim, and so on. Let's have a look at how the Torah describes it. So the Torah is like this. Right? So it's 10:38, chapter 20, Perachov, verse 1, Pasuk Aleph. Says the Pasuk, when you go to war against your enemies, and you will see a horse and chariot, a nation that is bigger than you, right? So it's going to be daunting. Do not be afraid. Hashem is with you. He brings you up. He brought you up from Mitzrayim. He'll be with you. He's fine. Okay. Now, and it will come to pass when you get close to the war. The nigash hakohen, the kohen will come forth. The diber el and speak to the nation. Give him a pep talk. What will he say? The Omar aleim. Shema Yisrael, listen here, Jewish people. Atem krevim hayoyim al milchama. You're coming close today to war. Alevechem, against your enemies. Al yerach levavchem. Do not have a soft heart. Al tiru, do not be afraid. Val tachbezu. Do not panic. Val tartzu mipneichem, and do not be broken before the enemy. Why? Similar thing. Hashem is going with you to fight your enemies. Liyashir eschem, to save you. Right? So do not be afraid. You're going to be fine. Hashem is with you. Okay. Then the officers come forth and they speak to the nation. They say the following: Lamer. Before we go to war, now it's like coming to crunch time. They're about to go to war. So he says the following: Mi ha'ish asher bona bayis chodesh v'lo chanocha. Is anyone here who has built a new house and not inaugurated it yet? Yelech v'yoshev lebeisa. You should go back home. You shouldn't fight. In case you'll die in war, ish acher yachnechenu, and leave it to someone else to inaugurate it. All right. Same thing. Umiya ish asher nota kerem. Is there a man here that has planted a vineyard, v'loy yechilaloi, and not redeemed it, which is a reference to what you do the fourth year after the fruit grows, to redeem the fruit with money and take it to Yerushalayim and so on. Yelech v'yoshev lebeisa, should go back home. Ki yomus l'chom, in case he dies in war. V'ish acher yichalalenu, and someone else will redeem it instead. And finally he says, Umiya ish asher eiras isha v'loy lakocha. Anyone who's betrothed a woman and had not properly married her yet, meaning was given a kiddushin, legally married, but they haven't lived together yet, they haven't had the chuppah, Yelech v'yoshev leveisa, you should go back home. Ben yamus al machom, in case he dies in war, ish acher yikachena, and someone else will marry her. Then says the pasuk, v'yosfu hashoitrim ledaber ela'am. Then the officers will continue to talk to the nation of Amr, and they will say the following: Mi ha'ish, who is the man here? Hayarei v'rach alevav. If he's scared or soft-hearted, go home. Yelech v'yoshev leveisa. Go home. Yimas es levav echav kelvavai, because he shouldn't bring down the morale. We need officers that are confident. Anyone who's scared here is going to lower the morale against the other soldiers, so therefore should go home. And then after all of this, when the officers finish talking to the nation, then they should take command at the head of the people, and they go out and they fight the war. Okay. So I think I told this before. They tell a story of the Chofetz Chaim, I think. That in the Chofetz Chaim times, there was a big problem, going back a few generations, there was a big problem with the maskilim, the enlightened people. These were like, similar to Reform, they were people that undermined Yiddishkeit in a very, very big way. They were very intellectual, they studied grammar, but they took the godliness out of Torah, and they were very problematic. They took a lot of youth away. It was a very big problem. And they made fun a lot of times of Rabbinic Judaism and Torah B'chlal and so on and so forth. So they came to tell the Chofetz Chaim that the Maskilim put on a play. They had a theater. They put on a play, and they made fun. What was the fun? They made fun of this whole Parsha here. That they had, the play was the nation of Jewish people going to war, and they had the Kohen and the officers get up and make all these announcements. Every time they make announcements, a bunch of people leave. And then they make the last announcement where everyone is scared to go, and everyone leaves, and there's 3 old rabbis there with long white beards left, and they're going to fight the war. Right? That was the latzonis, that was the fun the Maskilim were making. They came to tell the Chofetz Chaim, look what a terrible thing this is, big making fun of the Chumash. So the Chofetz Chaim said, it's not such a terrible play. It's good. They just left that one scene, that the 3 rabbis went to war and they won. Right? You follow the Torah, that's what happens. The Torah says that's what you should do. Yeah, you're right. A lot of people might leave, but that's what the Torah says. If you follow the way the Torah says to fight the war, you'll win. That was the comment of the Chos. Anyways, I heard this when I was in primary school. One of my teachers. Okay, but on this last announcement, right? On this last announcement that the officer makes, says whoever's afraid should go home, that he shouldn't make others afraid. It's a very interesting Rashi. It's on your handout, so it's not in Rashi letters. Have a look at the second part of your handout. Rashi says, Hayorei v'rachalevov. Whoever is afraid and soft-hearted. So there's a machloikas here, there's a dispute. What actually this means, right? Says Rashi, Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says, Kemashmoi, it means simply, if they're afraid, they should go, right? Afraid of war, in other words, right? What does that mean? Kemashmoi, what does that mean? It means someone that's very not able to stand in the throngs of war, to see drawn swords, he gets panicky, anxiety attack, should go home. Simple. That's simple pshat. The pasuk, in other words, is read in its simple way. That's one pshat. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, no, it means something different. What this announcement meant, Hayorei me'aveiroi shebeyodai. It means someone who's afraid of aveirus, afraid of sins that he has. Right? And he's afraid, I'm going now into war. Maybe I've transgressed some halachas. There's a rule that the Gemara tells us that Hasatan mekatreg b'shas hasakana, that the Satan prosecutes in times of danger. In other words, like this. It's interesting. The Gemara says with regard to a few things, that sometimes a person can be guilty of something, but Hashem doesn't punish. Hashem doesn't do tshuva, he waits, whatever the case is, right? But then when a person is in a situation of vulnerability anyway, is in a situation of danger and anyway is in danger, that's a good time for the Satan, the prosecutor, to come say, okay, well then let's take care of him there, right? And a person that is prone then to a greater degree of punishment. In other words, I'm just explaining that because what does it mean a person is scared of Averis? Meaning like this, if Hashem is going to punish him, he can punish him without going to the war. If he's not going to punish him, so the war is not going to affect him. So what does it mean he's scared? He's scared of this principle. Meaning a person is scared, I'm going to war, but I'm not perfect, I've done something wrong. Hashem is being kind to me, but I do know there's a principle when I go to war, the Satan is prosecuting a time of warfare, and therefore I don't want to go to war. Right? And that's what it means, says the Pasuk, says Rashi, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, that's what it means, someone who's afraid to go. That's what this last announcement means. When they made an announcement, whoever's afraid, meaning whoever thinks they've done something wrong and hasn't done tshuva properly yet, should go home. Okay? And then says Rashi, interesting thing, V'lochein, says Rashi, that's actually why the announcement was made that someone should go home if they planted a vineyard or built a house or married someone, they should go home. Why? Very interesting thing, because you can ask the question, what's this business? Why? Exemption from war because you built a new house? Because you went to a vineyard? So there's a war going on here. What do you mean? Right? Okay, marriage, I understand a little bit, but still, I mean, there's a war going on. You draft people in, you built a house, so? He says no, because according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, we understand it. Because l'chasos ala choizrim b'shvil averis v'yodam. It was actually meant to cover for the people who had to return because they did averis. Shle'avinu shem bala avera v'ra'ayu choizer omer shema bona bais and atakerem ba'eres isha. In other words, like this. The guy gets an announcement like this. There's 4 people that have to go home. People who built a house, a new vineyard, or a new wife. Right? And someone who's scared. And scared now means, according to Rabbi Yossi, scared of Averis. So 1,000 people pick themselves up and they go home. Right? No one knows why anyone's going home. If it was just an announcement, those who are afraid of Averis should go home, and 300 people pick themselves up and go, everyone looks it up, knows who the sinners are. It's embarrassing. Torah didn't want that. Right? Torah is amazing about, even people who sin, Torah is amazing about covering for the embarrassment of people. So the Torah is structured in such a way that other people should have to go home also. There should be a bit of a crowd going home, so we won't know who's going home because of Averis. Right? Amazing thing. That's according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, that's why it goes together with all the other announcements. Okay. However, the Rashi is problematic. That's what I want to go into a little bit, on 2 levels. Rashi has a rule, right, which he says many times in Bereshis, that his system is, he comes to explain what we call pshutoi shel mikra, the simple pshat of the pasuk, right? Simple pshat of the pasuk. We know a rule with Rashi, and that's what all the Mefarshim, the commentators of Rashi, all talk about this. Rashi never asks a question. You realize that? He just says statements 99% of the time, right? But we know that when every Rashi says something, it's because he had a problem with the pasuk. And the commentators, he writes very briefly, the commentators of Rashi have to now figure out what was bothering Rashi, right? Today's English book even called that. It's called What's Bothering Rashi, right? You can get results. So the Sifsei Chachamim, the Gourarie, different Mefrashim Rashi, all talk about what's bothering Rashi. See, here's a problem. What's not understood in the pasuk? The pasuk says, he gets an announcement that says, whoever's afraid should go home, and the pasuk even gives a reason. Because if you're afraid, you're going to downgrade the morale of the rest of the soldiers, right? Morale is very, very important in warfare. Morale has to do with confidence. If part of the nation is part of the people going to war are very, very scared and anxious, it's contagious, right? So what's not understood? It's very simple. The guy gets up and says, whoever's afraid should go home. What's the problem? What's the kasha? What's the question in the pasuk that needs an answer? Right? Number one. Number two, not only what's the question, Rashi gives two answers. One of the answers is that it means what it says. So we could know that without Rashi. Right? And not only that, there is sometimes Rashi says that we should read the pasuk simply before Rashi gives another alternative. But here Rashi goes into a whole arichos, a whole lengthy explanation. Pasuk means literally according to Rabbi Akiva, because a person can't bear to see drawn swords and to be in the throngs of war. What didn't we understand? Why does Rashi need to do that? Secondly, why does Rashi bring two interpretations? There's a rule, when Rashi brings two interpretations, the way it works normally is like this. Rashi is not a list of Mefarshim, right? That's not the function of Rashi. Rashi is just for us to explain, how to understand the simple pshat of the pasuk. When Rashi gives two interpretations, it means they both are simple pshat of the pasuk, but each one has an advantage over the other. There's a problem with either of them. Right? That's why Rashi brings both, so that we at least have both, right? What's missing? In other words, what's the problem with the first pshat? What's the problem with the second pshat? Why do we need two pshatim? What's going on here? And the third thing to understand, which we'll do on a bit of a philosophical level, is to understand why Rashi doesn't always do this. When Rashi brings two interpretations, he doesn't always bring the author of the interpretations. Like over here he brings Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi HaGlevi. What's the idea? So I'm going to share with you first of all just on a simple pshat, and then take it on a deeper level to connect it to the idea of Elul. So one of the things that the Lubavitch Rebbe used to do was talk about, he had a whole system of learning Rashi. So in one talk he explained this Rashi, and explained the following way. He says like this. Rashi was bothered by a very simple problem. Right? We started off on page 1038, the very first thing that the Jews were told is don't be afraid. Right? Which means the issue of fear was really dealt with. And presumably, that would mean that if people are afraid, they're not can't be part of the war. In other words, the officer had already got up before, the Kohen had already got up before, and made an announcement about fear. Don't be afraid, Hashem is going with you. Which would presumably mean that if you're not able to reach this madrega, you're not in the right place, you should go away. Right? So what's being added now? Right? What's being added by all of a sudden making a whole new announcement? Anyone who's afraid should leave because you're going to minimize the morale of the other soldiers. If the announcement had to be that explicit, it should have been in the beginning. Right? That's what's bothering Rashi on a simple level. So what does Rashi do? He gives two interpretations. One is Rabbi Akiva. But Rashi doesn't just say kamashmo'ai, in other words, go according to the literal translation. Rashi explains. He's saying because a person can't bear to be in the throngs of war. What does that mean? So Rashi is explaining why something is different now. What was the first pshat of Rashi is why something is different. What's different between the beginning announcement and now? The beginning announcement was more theoretical. Right now, it's on the border. They're about to attack. Right? Says Rashi, yes, fear was taken care of before. It's true. Fear was taken care of before. But now it's getting more real. So now there's people who will suddenly, they weren't scared before, but now suddenly, as they're about to attack, swords are being drawn, there's about to be a real attack, suddenly they get a new anxiety, a new fear. Right? And that's why he says that the one pshat in this pasuk is true. Rashi's answering a question that was talked about before, but now we're talking about someone that's already looking at swords and he's looking at we are about to attack, so therefore it's a new level of fear. And that's why he makes a new announcement. Those who are afraid now should leave and don't destroy the morale. Right? The problem with that pshat is that it's not such a big gap between the first announcement and this announcement. In other words, all announcements were done together. So it is closer to the war, but really nothing much has changed in the last hour, right? I mean, yes, it's becoming more real because they finished the announcements about the attack, but it's not so smooth in understanding the pshat of the pasuk. You follow? Because he just made the announcement. It's not like he made an announcement last week. It's all part of one announcement, right? So really, what did change in the last hour? I mean, it's all part of the same announcement, really, right? Which is why Rashi brings a second pshat. And the pshat is that no, it's talking about a new fear now. It's not talking about fear of war. It's talking about fear of Averis. Right? Fear of Averis. But Rashi doesn't only give that pshat because there's a problem with that pshat also. That's very not literal. That pshat is a bit out of the pshat. In other words, the simple pshat is proper fear of war, right? This is a bit of a kvetch, not a little bit out of literal pshat, but it has an advantage because it's something new at least. It answers the question better, but it doesn't flow so good in the pasuk. Therefore, Rashi brings both pshatim. So in other words, like this. The first pshat that is talking about real fear of war fits better in the meaning of the pasuk, but doesn't answer the question so much about why we need a second announcement. The second pshat of Rabbi Yossi Aglili answers the question better. In other words, why we need a second announcement, because it's talking about a completely different fear than the fear in the first part of the announcement, but doesn't flow so good in the pasuk itself. It doesn't flow in the simple meaning of the pasuk. So there's advantage with each pshat. Yeah, with me. What does Rashi bring? Who the author? Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Aglili. So here he took it to a whole new level and connected it to the month of Elul. The Gemara says. The Gemara actually it's an interesting phrase. The Gemara in Sanhedrin, talking about a group of people, talking about the people of the Midbar that rebelled against Hashem and didn't want to go into Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara discusses whether they have a portion in the world to come. And there Rabbi Akiva is a little bit harsh, and he says, no, they don't have a word to. Hashem was angry with them, and he destroyed them physically, but also spiritually, and they don't have a portion in the world to come. And the Gemara there says a phrase, a very interesting phrase. The Gemara says, Shafkei Rabbi Akiva lechasidusei. Rabbi Akiva has departed from his normal compassion. And the Rashi explains it, the other Mefarshim explain, that Rabbi Akiva was known to be melamed zchus. He was known to always be very lenient on everyone. He was known to make it good, in other words, for other people, right? And this is explained in many Mefarshim. Rabbi Akiva came from a very sort of interesting background. His father was a convert. He himself was ignorant for the first 40 years. He didn't come like Moshe Rabbeinu from a holy background. He came from very humble beginnings, and he understood those people that fail. He understood those people that struggle, and therefore he always said good things about them. And he was compassionate to them, and he always tried to lift them up and to define them in a very good context, right? So he explains like this. Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Aglili are actually talking about two levels of tshuva, right? Rabbi Akiva doesn't want to say the pshat in this pasuk that he was scared of Averis. Why? Because Rabbi Akiva holds like this. Let's understand the picture here. Person's going to war. He comes closer to the war and he gets scared. Why does he get scared? He remembers, that he didn't put on tefillin properly. He didn't daven properly, right? He's done Averis. So it bothers him. He's scared of the Averis, right? He regrets doing the Averis, obviously, right? And now he's worried. He's going to go into war, and he's going to have these Averis with him, and it's going to affect him in the war. Rabbi Akiva holds that itself is tshuva. The fact that he's worried about his Averis means he no longer has the Averis. Right? So therefore Rabbi Akiva, he's the melamed zchus, he's the person who always says good things about Adi Yidden. He says that he cannot be such a person. That fear cannot exist. Because a person who's worried about his Averis has no longer the Averis. He's clean. That tshuva is done. Right? Rabbi Yossi Aglili, however, is saying, it's a nice start, but he hasn't done proper tshuva. Tshuva means it's a process. Tshuva means you've got to really go into the details. You've got to leave the Aveira. You've got to demonstrate in the future that you've done tshuva, that you've regretted, that you're not doing the Aveira again. Right? Tshuva is not just waking up. It's a process. And therefore Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, no, I think the pshat in this pasuk is that the person who's scared is scared about the Averis. Yes and good, he's done it, he's made a good start. He's scared about the Averis, but he hasn't finished. He's still got tshuva to do. Right? So that's what he says, that's the two. That's what Rashi brings there, Machlokes says between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Saglili, because the fact that we know that the first pshat is Rabbi Akiva sheds some light why Rabbi Akiva doesn't want to say the second pshat. He doesn't want to say the pshat of Rabbi Saglili. Because he says it's not right the pshat according to Rabbi Akiva, because he says once a person's afraid of the Averis, he's done tshuva already. Okay, that's the pshat in the Rashi. However, he connected it to a very interesting thing about Elul and Rosh Hashanah, right? So we know that we blow shofar during Elul, and we also blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah, of course, right? And there's different levels, different ideas behind blowing shofar, and we know that the whole process of tshuva begins in Elul, and we have to get a little bit of appreciation of what is the tshuva. So this concept of Rabbi Akiva, right? This idea of Rabbi Akiva of being aware and waking up is a very important part of tshuva. Let's have a look at a Rambam. The Rambam says, right? Famous Rambam, it's on number 3 on your handout. The Rambam says like this: Afal pi shetkiya shofar b'Rosh Hashanah, even though blowing shofar on Rosh Hashanah, gzeiras hakosuf, it's just a decree. In other words, really there's no reason for shofar. Hashem just says to do it. However, we know the famous Rambam, remez yesh po, there's a hint there's a meaning behind the shofar. What is it? Koloimar. What is the shofar? The shofar is Uru yeshenim b'shinaschem. Wake up, those asleep from your sleep. V'nirdomim hokitzu mitar demaschem, and those that are in a deep slumber, wake up for your slumber. V'chipsu b'maseichem, and start searching your deeds. V'chizru b'tshuva, and return to tshuva. Then it says, V'zichru boirachem, you should remember your Creator. Why should you remember your Creator? Which means, says the Rambam, Eilu hashoichechim meso'emes behavle azman, those who forget the truth with the passage of time, shoygim kol shnasam behevel arik, and spend their life with emptiness, ashal hayoyev v'leyatzi, that will not help and not save. Habitu lenafshei seichem, look carefully into your souls, ve'tivu darchechem, improve your ways, u'malalechem, and your wrongdoings, ve'yaziv kol echad michem darkei hara. Each one should leave their bad ways, machshavtes, bad thoughts, ashal hayoyev, they're not good. Right? That's the whole thing of shofar. So it's very interesting here to look at the order of the Rambam, right? Just give me 1 second here. So there's one part of what I want to explain to you. I just want to remind myself. Give me 1 minute. Yeah. So there's a problem here with the Rambam. If you look at the Rambam, right? Look at the Rambam's order. He says like this: Shofar means wake up from your sleep and look at your deeds and do tshuva, right? Then he starts the whole thing. Remember your Creator, look at your deeds, make sure you leave your bad ways, etc., etc. Zichru barachem, to remember Hashem and to really examine and scrutinize where we're up to and what we've been doing, really should come before the word v'chizru b'tshuva. Okay? In other words, the Rambam says, wake up from your sleep and do tshuva. Then he says, remember your Creator. Remember that you're spending your life doing wrong things and your emptiness of the details, and start improving, right? That should come before the word v'chizru b'tshuva. It should come before the word do tshuva. How do we do tshuva? The Rambam is explaining how to do tshuva. He explains this is exactly like the Rashi we just learned. There's 2 parts to tshuva. We need to understand that both Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Aglili are very, very important. Perhaps the most fundamental part of doing tshuva, more than anything, is waking up. Waking up, right? In other words, knowing that we have to do tshuva itself is an amazing tshuva. And in fact, that's the most critical part of tshuva done. Knowing that we have to improve, knowing that we're asleep is the greatest tshuva that we can do. According to Rabbi Akiva, that's it. In fact, the person, that's full tshuva. Right? Now, of course, we don't pass like that and we don't rule like that, and of course, that's not a complete tshuva. But it's important to understand how important it is, because that's what the Rambam says. The Rambam says, shofar is, wake up those who sleep, those who slumber, wake up from your slumber, the chizru b'tshuva and do tshuva. That's it. Why? That's actually the most of the work. Most of the work is realizing that we have to change. Being awakened, being inspired to want to change. And in a way, that's the difference between the shofar and Elul and the shofar and Rosh Hashanah, if we break it down more specifically. Shofar and Elul is a very simple shofar. It's an alarm clock. Wake up, it's Elul. It's time to change, time to move, time to stir. Then says the Rambam, we've got to go through Rabbi Yossi Aglili as well. In other words, that's the main job is done. But then you've got to translate it to specifics. So you've got to understand what are the specific areas of strengths, areas of weaknesses. You've got to leave strength of the weaknesses. You've got to leave what you're not doing right and make and improve it. That's details. Also very important. We have to get there. Right? And in fact, the Mefarshim explain that's Rosh Hashanah, the Shvarim, the Trua, the Tkiyah, all represent different types of tshuva. The three brachos of Shemona Esra, Malchiyah, Zichroinus, and Shofras, all different levels and layers and details of tshuva. But all of that is important, but will not happen, and not even as important as the fundamental part of tshuva, which is wake up. And that's what Rabbi Akiva is teaching us. Rabbi Akiva is teaching us that a person who suddenly hayore, he's scared of his averis, and he'll realize, oops, I'm in a uncomfortable spot here. That's it. That's the main tshuva. To the point where Rabbi Akiva says that's such an important tshuva that I'm not even worried about the guy in warfare anymore. Therefore, he doesn't want to learn the pshat, the second pshat. Rabbi Saglini says that's nice, that's true, but you got to then continue. You got to get into specifics as well. But the most fundamental part of tshuva, which really the month of Elul is really, that's what it is really. Before we get into the whole cheshbon and everything, right? It's step one. Step one is actually waking up. Once heard in a different time, I was actually at a Fabrengen once where the Rebbe said a very beautiful thing. He said that if you ask anyone in the Siddur, right? What's the first thing in the Siddur? So I'll tell you, the first thing in the Siddur is Moidani. Right? Wake up in the morning, he said Moidani. He says, no, it's a mistake. Look at every Siddur. Most during the Siddur, the beginning of the Siddur is not Moidani. There's a little paragraph before Moidani. It says, K'shayer mishnasi, when you get up from your sleep, then you start Moidani. That's the first part of the Siddur. First part of the day is you have to wake up. But then there's Moidani, and there's Brachas, and there's Shemona Esra. If you're not awake, it's all irrelevant. If you're still sleeping, the Siddur doesn't begin. The first part, the most important part of the day is wake up. Then you can start Moidani, Brachas, Negovas, davening, Tefillin, whatever they say, right? Same thing with tshuva. The first tshuva, and perhaps the most fundamental part of tshuva is the wake-up call. Like Rabbi Akiva says, just knowing that you need to do tshuva, that in itself is amazing. And then comes the second part, then you can't obviously stop there, then you've got to actually translate that into action, into details, and into specifics. But comes Elul, of course, we know that that's a month where Hashem gives us an opportunity, because it's a month of tremendous closeness. It's a month that Hashem is very close to us, like the Melech Masala, the king in the field, is accessible. So it gives us the opportunity to do tshuva, but we just have to take the opportunity and we have to do something about it. And of course, Hashem will give us all these brachas for Ksiv V'Chsima Tova. That's it for today. I will give a shir next week as well. I'm only leaving the next day, so I'll give the shir next Tuesday as well. And then the 2 weeks after that, there will be a shir. So 1 week Rav Shua is going to give the shir, another week Rabbi Mas is going to give the shir. So there will be a Parsha shir. We're not stopping. Have a good day.
It's so interesting about me listening